everybody. Welcome to a Shadow at Night special. I know it's early, and we'll be back with the regular show in a couple of hours featuring BC Strong members James Davidson, Marcella Desjarlais, Dr. Stephen Malthouse, and Dr. Charles Hoff as they discuss what's going on in BC right now. Apparently, David Eby has become somewhat of an authoritarian out there and wants to pass strong premier powers. So we're going to discuss that. Bill 7, Bill 21, the Infant Act, repeal Bill 36 as well, all on the table tonight during the regular show at 8 o'clock Central Time. Also, I caught a photo that Katie Pisitny of Universal Ostrich Farm in British Columbia posted on Facebook about an hour ago. Her and her mom were on their way back from the court proceedings, and they didn't give us any updates. We don't know what happened. All we know is that they were both smiling very, very happily in this photo. So I'm hoping that it's good news that came out of that court case the last couple of days. And I'll be looking for information on that as we continue. This debate tonight, Pierre Poilievre needs to land a knockout blow. Never mind Jagmeet Singh. Never mind Blanchet. Those two guys are irrelevant in this debate. Blanchet was relevant last night in Quebec, obviously. Singh, not at all. Poilievre, probably not as much as Blanchet. And, of course, Mark Carney, everybody's got their target on him, except for some reason Jagmeet Singh, who was attacking Poilievre more than Carney last night in the French language debate, which makes me think even more that the NDP are throwing this election completely. It's projected they're going to get 8 seats in this next parliament, which would put them below party status level. They would lose their funding. They would lose speaking privileges in the House. Yeah, disaster for the NDP, possibly coming up. I want to take you, while we're waiting for the debate to begin, I want to take you to last night's post-French debate question period with some of the leaders. You see, independent media was allowed in last night. So Juno News was there, Rebel News was there. And let me show you a couple of the questions. First, it's Alex Zoltan from Juno News asking a question of Mark Carney. Watch this.
I'm with True North. If you thought my friend's question was odd, you're going to love this one.
I'm glad you self-assessed that. Okay.
How many genders are there?
In terms of sex, there are 2. Thank you.
My follow-up question then, do you believe that women, biological women, have the right to their own spaces, their own sports, their own change rooms, their own prisons, their own homeless shelters?
I think this is Canada, and that as a general objective, yes. But we work in where we value all Canadians for who they are, and we'll continue to do so. Thank you very much.
We can value all Canadians for who they are, but what about their mental conditions? What these people need is psychiatric help. So that was an interesting question that has not been brought up at all in any of the rhetoric surrounding the campaign for the last few weeks. And then here's, what's her name? Alexis Lavoie of Rebel News trying to get an answer out of Jagmeet Singh. And look at his amazing arrogance here. Watch.
You have been a member of Parliament for 6 years, which now gives you the right to a pension. Before that, you were a provincial member, and you have spent much of your career having your salary paid by the public. But you decided to boycott the Conservatives and others, and you supported Justin Trudeau's bill on the internet. Now, this is paid by all Canadians. Why do you think it's ethically acceptable to marginalize Conservatives and to refuse to treat them with respect? I will not answer your question from Rebel News, so I will not take that question. But I will take the time to say that for me, what is critical in this election is the issue of who will fight for Canadians, who will defend the things that people hold dear, such as health care, who will defend the interests of everyday Canadians and not rich CEOs, and who will be able to stand up to companies that rip Canadians off. I have a holiday, so you'll have to listen to me again. No, you feel that the Indians feel that your opinions are not acceptable, and you refuse to answer questions from journalists with whom you disagree, as you've just done now. I presume that in your opinion, we should be punished one way or another. So how are you any different from authoritarian politicians that you would imprison for their ideas? This is another reason why I do not take questions from Rebel News, because you promote disinformation, and your question is an example of that.
Question in English, please.
Wow. Now, speaking of arrogance, this was the CBC last night, amazed, astounded, in disbelief that there would be any independent journalism let into the debates for questions at all. Watch.
Rosie, I'm curious what stood out to you, because at one point when some of those last questions came up, I just checked to make sure, yeah, no, we're in Canada. Because the identity politics questions have not emerged much.
This happens on the same day that the United Kingdom court ruled that woman and sex refer to biological woman and biological sex. True North is a very right-wing website, and there have been issues in the past with who gets allowed into these scrums and who's allowed to ask questions of the leaders. The commission, Debates Commission, was the one who decided that these people were allowed to come in and ask these kinds of questions. So there you go.
All right.
These people. Didn't Don Cherry get fired for something like that? These people. Well, she just said these people. Like the incredible. Oh, it's amazing. Okay, it looks like the debate's about to begin, you guys. Let me throw it up on the screen here and turn on the sound.
Good evening. You're looking right now at a bird's eye view of the Maison de Radio-Canada in Montreal, the site of tonight's English language leaders debate, where in about 25 minutes' time, we'll see all the major party leaders take to those podiums in the atrium and participate in a 2-hour exchange, the only English language debate of Canada's 45th general election campaign. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Thank you for joining us this evening on...
Did they push back the start time? It was supposed to be 7 o'clock Eastern, not 7:30. Is there another important hockey game on tonight that I didn't realize? All right, so now I've got 25 minutes to fill. That's fine. That's fine. We can go ahead and do some Q&As here. What do you guys think is the important... What needs to happen in the debate tonight? What absolutely has to happen? Because if the polls are to be believed, and again, I think they're very sketchy. Let's just put it like that. And I know the Liberals have got a lot of soft support. Because I think I said this on the show last night. We've been hearing for years, ad nauseum, that the Liberals are the natural governing party of Canada. And it seems as though that maybe they are the default party when people go to the polls to vote federally, not so much provincially. Because provincially is a whole different matter. In Ontario, you've got 3 parties, generally speaking, that run provincially. Manitoba, there's only 2. You've got the NDP and the PCs, the Progressive Conservatives, and the Liberals don't even register in Manitoba. Saskatchewan, it's the Saskatchewan Party and the NDP. Alberta, you got the UCP and the NDP. Quebec is a completely different ballgame. I'm not sure what it's like in Atlantic Canada provincially. But when it comes to federal... For some reason, people go, well, I'm not right and I'm not left, which means I'm not NDP and I'm not conservative. I think I'm going to vote Liberal because they're right in the middle. Even though that party has been so far left for the past 10 years because of Justin Trudeau and his minions. And now what it sounds like to me is that Mark Carney steps in. Mark Carney, 59, 60-year-old banker. He's got world experience. He was the governor of the Bank of Canada, then the governor of the Bank of England. He's dealt in the UN. People hear all of this stuff. They don't know him, I don't think. But he comes across as this calming, sort of fatherly figure to many of these people. And I think just that alone, and I understand what you guys might be saying right now. You're going, they're not listening to the issues. They don't know what this guy's really all about. I totally get that. I understand completely. But many people don't know the issues, and they won't know the issues. And so they're throwing the persona of Mark Carney out there. After 10 years of riding that roller coaster with all those Justin Trudeau scandals and the tongue and the black face and all of, the lying, they look at Carney and go, oh, man, like that's the guy we need running this ship, somebody to calm it down. And then they look at Pierre Poilievre, who's the younger guy, right? And he comes off, I suppose, to some of these folks, because Canadians, as somewhat abrasive, because he corrects the premise of many reporters' questions, and the reporters don't like that. They get their noses out of joint. But obviously, you can't answer a question that's set up to make you look like a fraud or a liar or a right-wing knuckle dragger or whatever it is they're trying to set you up as. And so he corrects the premise of those questions. I think he does it actually quite smartly. I don't think he does it arrogantly at all. And I think in the past week or so, and maybe this is too late, Poilievre has been trying to get the message out to Canadians via YouTube, mostly podcasts we've never heard of, because people have been urging, you got to go do podcasts. You got to do podcasts. And so he did a couple of these podcasts, and I'd never heard of any of the podcasts that he's been on, which are 2 or 3, and he brought his wife on with him, and he talked about their kids and how one of them is special needs and how much he's learned from being a father and a husband, and just the years spent in Parliament as an MP serving his constituents. So they're trying to soften his image somewhat, but that probably should have happened a year ago, even 2 years ago. And I know they tried it a while back, and then they just dropped that campaign altogether. But it seems to me that the Conservative numbers go up when Poilievre gets feisty, when Poilievre starts calling things out, not when he's placating or trying to placate. And I totally get that they're trying to make him look more human, like a young father. He's got a heart, because that's the rap on Conservatives too, right? You heartless Conservatives, you're monsters. Because for years and years and years, whenever a Conservative government gets elected anywhere, whether it's a province or federally, they have to come in and clean up the mess left behind by the previous government, usually an NDP or Liberal government, who's been overspending for 5 or 6 years. And now, because there's no money left in the provincial or federal coffers, you've got to cut stuff. You've got to cut stuff, or you've got to raise taxes. It's one or the other. Or you lose your AAA bank rating, and it costs more money to borrow money. Your interest rates go up, which means your taxes go up, and so on and so on and so on. Bad fiscal policy from the left means that the right has to come in and cut stuff, and people don't like that. I don't understand why people don't just get the idea that you can't have both. You can't, hang on. You can't have both. You can't have big government programs that cost money and low taxes at the same time. It doesn't work like that. You've got to have high taxes for all of these programs. And I'm going to be completely honest in this question here and answer. Have you ever, of all the government programs, provincial, federal, whatever, that have ever been offered, have you qualified for any of them? Have you ever even bothered to try to qualify for any of them? I know I have not. I just look at these programs like a waste, because they say, we're rolling out dental care. We're rolling out this. Whatever program it is they've rolled out over the years. For some reason, it's always seemed to evade me. I just look at it and go, oh, great. So you're just giving people more free stuff so they'll vote for you. That's pretty much all it is. Anything the government provides outside of building roads, basic infrastructure, can be handled by the private sector. It can be regulated by government, but it doesn't need to be handled and done and executed by the government. That's, the problem I've had for many, many years when it comes to government-run liquor stores, government-run casinos, government-run this, government-run that. Get out of the way. But people will lose jobs. No, they'll just keep working for whoever's running it. Whatever private agency comes in and decides they're going to run it. And big government leads to big problems as far as I'm concerned. Mark Carney is all about bigger government, and Poilievre is not. But that's the problem that conservatives have. Whenever they come into power, they got to bring out the scissors, and people go, oh, you're evil. You're cutting child care. You're cutting dental care. You're cutting medical services for way up north where there's 3 people living. Not to say those people don't deserve health care, but I mean, come on. There's 3 of you living up there in the remote north. I mean, you probably got to take that into consideration before you move up there in the first place. So it looks like there's a panel on CPAC right now. Let me throw this up here and see what these guys are talking about. This guy here that Michael Serapio's talking to is the CBC pollster, or used to be the CBC pollster. He does a podcast now. And I forget his name, but...
would win 196 seats right now, in part because of the regional leads that we see. They have about a 9-point lead in Ontario.
Yeah, so he's going off on the polls right now, and there's your projections in terms of polling. 196 seats for the Liberals. Unbelievable. 190. How is the debate live right now? Oh, there we go. Okay. I'm just going to go back. Here we go. Okay.
As a win for him, then I think it was. He'll obviously.
I would say, I think Carney had a good night. I don't think it's just because he didn't fall on his face.
We'll talk about in pretty safe, trying to achieve their very modest goals,
given the number of Francophone voters in Quebec. And if Pierre Poilievre wants to form government, arguably he needs to do better than the polls are predicting he's going to do in Quebec right now. He's now facing the leaders once again in the
starting point for negotiations, Mr. Carney, with the United States, if, as you have stated, our relationship with the U.S. is over as we know it?
Well, first, Steve, may I thank you and also thank fellow leaders for their service to Canada, people at home for taking the time to watch. I just want to underscore the premise to your question, because I think the relationship that we've had with the United States, relationship over the course of almost the last 4 decades, which has been one of steady and increasing integration, has fundamentally changed, because the president is looking to fundamentally restructure the trading system. So the starting point has to be one of strength. It has to show that we have control of our own economic destiny, has to have a clear plan here at home to build this economy, to diversify our trading partners with like-minded countries, and also has to have a position of strength in terms of our reaction to the U.S. unjustified tariffs. And that's why we have put in place counter tariffs that have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impact here at home.
Mr. Poilievre, would you do anything differently?
Well, first of all, thank you, Steve, and thank you to our fellow contestants here today. It's an honor to be here. What would I do different? Well, I'll start by what I would do the same. I think we do need to counter the American tariffs with our own to deter this economic aggression. We must make clear that we will always be sovereign and independent. What would I be doing differently? Well, we need to be in a position of strength. The Liberal government has weakened our economy with anti-energy laws, red tape, and high taxes that have driven $500 billion out of our country into the United States and made us incapable of shipping our resources overseas. That weakness threatens our ability to stand up for ourselves. So what would I do? I would cut taxes, red tape, and approve our resource projects so that we can get our goods to market and bring home the jobs, so we stand up to President Trump from a position of strength.
Mr. Singh, you get the next question. Can we trust the United States to work with us on matters such as Arctic sovereignty and defense policy?
I think we've seen, first of all, good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in, and thanks for the question, Steve. We've seen what, for a lot of people, feels like a betrayal when we look at the United States. I grew up in a border town. I grew up in Windsor, and we saw how connected we were as a city and as a community. People lived on one side of the border, worked on the other. People traveled back and forth all the time. We're in the automotive capital of Canada, and we knew how important it was to be able to build cars in Canada, but we saw that those cars went back and forth across the border. Seeing what Donald Trump did to attack Canada in this unprovoked way without any justification really felt like a betrayal. And so Canadians now are right to say, well, we don't really trust Donald Trump at this point, and we can't really have a lot of faith in him. So when it comes to our Arctic sovereignty and our security, we need to make decisions that are in our best interest and no longer be so dependent and so reliant on the U.S. And that's what I would advocate for, making sure we are resilient, independent, and less dependent on the United States.
Monsieur Blanchet, for you, what supports would you want to see for industries affected by tariffs, many, of course, of which are in Quebec?
Many of them. First, be all welcome in Quebec and Montreal. You have me because I try not to speak English in Montreal. However, I think we should never underestimate the threat that Mr. Trump poses on Quebec economy and Canada economy and Mexico economy. But we must acknowledge the fact that the economy of Quebec is built differently. The challenges are not the same. The necessity for Quebec to have at least partly its own voice in the negotiation is important. The difference between Quebec and Canada is very important in terms of economy, but also in terms of identity and language and values and who we are and the way we want to handle immigration. So we have the right to be different, and if this difference is being respected by whoever becomes Prime Minister of Canada, we will be reliable partners in order to achieve the best possible negotiation and protect ourselves and our economies as partners.
Merci, Monsieur Blanchet. Okay, we now move into open debate, and I'll start it off, Mr. Carney, with you, and then we go from there. Do you still support dollar-for-dollar tariffs, even if they ultimately threaten Canadian jobs and businesses?
No, and in fact, we've already moved off from dollar-for-dollar tariffs. We have to recognize, and I think we all do, the United States economy is more than 10 times the size of the Canadian economy. And the principle in terms of our counter tariffs is to have maximum impact in the United States, as I said a moment ago, minimum impact here. So we have to think about the impact on Canadian businesses. I'll give you one example, if I may. In the auto sector, the way we've designed those auto tariffs is that Canadian automakers, if they maintain production here, if they maintain their investments here, when I say Canadian automakers, I mean automakers that have jobs and plants and production in Canada, then they can have lower tariffs on what they ship to the United States. We create a huge incentive for them in order to do that. We also have carved out the Canadian auto parts sector. Last point, I know you're pressed for time, the Canadian auto parts sector, so that it can remain competitive with the United States. We're focused on maximizing Canadian jobs, maximizing the harm in the U.S., so that we get them where we need them.
Mr. Poilievre, you want in, then Mr. Singh.
Well, Mr. Carney, you claim that you want our country to respond with strength, but after the last decade, half of which time you've been Justin Trudeau's economic advisor, our economy is weaker than ever before. It's been the worst growth in the G7. We've lost $500 billion of investment south of the border. You supported blocking pipelines in Canada that gave Donald Trump and the U.S. a near monopoly over our energy. And now you want to keep in place Bill C-69, the liberal no new development law that blocks us from shipping our resources overseas. How could you possibly think it's a good idea to give the Americans a continued monopoly on our energy projects when you have seen how much these liberal policies have weakened our country over the last decade?
Let Mr. Carney respond, and then Mr. Singh.
Sure. If I may, yes. So let's go to my record. My record is a month long as Prime Minister. And this goes to the heart of coming to the Americans with strength, but doing the right thing for Canada. Within the first week as Prime Minister, I sat down with all the premiers of the provinces and territories, as well as the leaders of the Indigenous peoples. got an agreement with all the provinces and territories, doesn't happen very often, got an agreement for them to have one Canadian economy instead of 13, first point. Secondly, to commit the federal government to do its part by Canada Day, so free trade in Canada by Canada Day. Thirdly, the federal government to commit with respect to project reviews.
The question was about
Sorry,
pipelines.
I'm getting to it. Thirdly, one project, one review, and relying
That's
on
possible
provincial.
under
Yes, it is
69.
possible under. It is possible on our system.
No,
it
it's
is
not.
the
It's
impact
banned under
assessment.
C69.
It is agreed on under the impact assessment framework, and we have a cooperation agreement with British Columbia already. We're looking forward to them with the other provinces. We will move forward.
Gotta let you. Okay, Mr. Singh's turn, please.
Of course, we agree around having a strategic response to the United States. But what I'm concerned about is what we're doing here in Canada. We are already seeing threats to our country in that just the threats alone of the tariffs have meant Canadians have lost their jobs. The threats of the tariffs that are in place right now, the impact of those tariffs is that we've lost jobs in steel, aluminum, and the auto sector. People are already losing their jobs. And while, Mr. Carney, you had time, as you mentioned, not very long time, but as Prime Minister, you showed us your priorities. The first thing you did is you had traveled, you made a tax cut for millionaires, which was reversing on the capital gains. So you gave a tax cut to millionaires, but you didn't have time to increase the amount that workers get on EI. Right now, workers who are struggling and wondering, what am I going to do if I lose my job? Workers who've lost their job are saying, how do I pay my bills when EI only covers half of a worker's salary? Maybe 40 years ago that would have worked, but right now most workers are spending their entire salary just to pay the bills, to pay their mortgage and their rent, and to put food on the table. So EI is not good enough, and it shows Canadians that you didn't make it a priority to protect those that are impacted by these tariffs, that are threatened because their jobs are lost.
We have not heard from Monsieur Blanchet yet in this segment, so please.
Yeah, Mr. Carney, you are becoming a real Canadian leader, saying one thing in French and another one in English. You said in British Columbia in February that you would force oil and gas through pipelines through Quebec, either we wanted it or not. You would use emergency powers in order to do so. And 2 days later in Montreal, you said that you would never do that without the approval of Quebec. What's the point of using emergency powers if you do have the agreement of Quebec? However, I do agree with you. It's important to be very strong in front of Mr. Trump. However, I would keep the dollar for dollar policy. Don't be weak in front of Mr. Trump. And those counter tariffs have to be targeted. You have put out already $2 billion for Ontario auto industry, car industry, and the lumberwood industry in Quebec has already paid to United States $2 billion, and you have not raised one finger in order to help us.
Let's get from Mr. Poilievre and then a response from Mr. Carney.
Well, Mr. Carney refused to answer the question about pipelines. Just the other day, he said that he doesn't necessarily think we need to build pipelines. Let me tell you what that means. Right now, the Americans get 97% of our oil, 100% of our natural gas exports at big discounts. We have to send Canadian oil from Western Canada through the States just to get it back to Quebec because we don't have a pipeline. And now there's this law, Liberal Law C69, which effectively bans pipelines. The 14 biggest energy and resource companies say it has to go if we're ever going to build another project. And I asked Mr. Carney why he would keep in place this anti-pipeline law that effectively empowers Donald Trump to have a total monopoly on our single biggest export. Why would you not repeal this Liberal law? Isn't it because you are exactly the same in the same line as Justin Trudeau and the rest of the Liberal team that is now making up your cabinet?
That's what he needs to do.
Well, let me pick up a couple of points that have been made. The first thing I did as Prime Minister was to cut the carbon tax. That's the first thing. Second thing is made a commitment that
no,
all
interrupt him and say you didn't cut the
proceeds
carbon
from
tax.
Will go to workers and those companies most affected. There were several points
Means
raised.
nothing so far.
I may, if Mr. Steve, if I may address, I'm trying to do it quickly because several points raised. All proceeds go to workers and the firms most effective, and those proceeds are considerable. Third thing, I'm interested in solutions. I'm interested in getting energy infrastructure built. That means pipelines, that means carbon capture, storage, that means electricity grids. And here's how you do it. And we've already moved in the first month.
cooperation agreements with the provinces. Guess what? We are a federation. You need to cooperate with Quebec. You need to cooperate with the provinces. You need to get First Nations and Indigenous people buy-in. You can do that through the one project, one review.
Is he
window that we
flip-flopping
put
on
in
the
place
pipeline
at that
nationally
first
now?
Ministers' meeting, as well as, if necessary, using emergency powers to fulfill the federal responsibility, but not the unique.
Mr. Poilievre, you want to come back on that?
What you're saying, Mr. Carney, with respect, is a total contradiction. The No New Development Law, C-69, guarantees there will not be one-stop shop because it requires the Government of Canada to actually duplicate
So what Mr. Poilievre is saying is that have no rules,
project.
have no regulation,
have one
have no
stop
controls.
shop.
Shut up, Jagmeet.
Mr. Singh, we just got to let him finish his sentence. Let's just let him finish his sentence.
That is not true. In fact, Mr. Singh, the reality is we should have strong rules enforced once. We shouldn't have multiple levels of referral that it takes now 17 years to get a major project approved in this country.
Look at the lefties laughing with each other.
In the last 10 years, we've had the worst economic growth in the entire G7. We cannot afford a fourth Liberal term. We need a change, and the Conservative plan for a change will include repealing the anti-pipeline law so we can get our energy to markets other than the United States.
Mr. Singh, then Mr. Carney.
While these two compete about who's more pro-pipeline, I think what we need to do is, I mean, it's clear the Liberals bought a pipeline, they built a pipeline. I don't know what Pierre is complaining about. That's what they did. I think what we need to do, if we're talking about energy in our country, we need to build an east-west grid. Let's use our power as a nation to build a national project that creates good jobs, that strengthens us for the future, where we connect the low-cost energy from jurisdictions and provinces across this beautiful land and have low-cost energy for businesses, for people, so we can build a stronger economy. That's the energy of the future that we need.
Mr. Carney.
3 quick points.
What energy corridor?
The pipeline built, yes, TMX built. That's why oil exports up 50% over the course of the last few years. Secondly,
I don't think
Mr. Singh is absolutely right about the east-west grid. Grid interconnections, which is part of the energy corridor, huge opportunities for this country. We have to be able to do more than one thing. Third point, fundamental point. We can give ourselves far more than Donald Trump can ever take away. If we have one Canadian economy, not 13, and if we just look at that agreement we got with the provinces, look at what Ontario and Nova Scotia have just announced in terms of their steps towards this. This is within our grasp.
Monsieur Blanchet, what should we be prepared to concede in our negotiations
What
with the United
east-west
States?
corridor are they talking about?
I want to be back to something that Mr. Carney said. You can't do something and the opposite, and you can't fill people's mind with nonsense. Quebec has, by law, its own environmental review institution, and you cannot, through a federal decision, even through a Quebec government decision, go over the BAP, as we call it. If the BAP says no,
just say
it's no.
I know.
Good.
I know,
Let's
but this
keep
is
that in mind.
This is the point. This is, if I may, this is the point. The federal government can do the following, which is to take the decision to abide by the decision of the Quebec BAP. That is within the federal government's power. That is known as cooperative federalism. That's what we need to do.
And do you understand one other point fast?
This is what we need. This is what we need to do in a crisis.
Brèvement ici, and then Mr. Poilievre.
Yeah. The building of those pipelines will take at least 10 to 14 years.
No, they won't.
Mr. Trump will be 90 years old, not president no more, and somebody of course, less terrible will be there before you can even dream of having oil through this pipeline of yours.
We're less than a minute to go. Mr. Poilievre, I promised you next.
Listen, after the last 10 years of Liberals blocking pipelines and killing jobs.
Sounds wild when you say that.
We actually need to get things done.
Sense.
We need a change, and our Conservative plan for change will repeal the No New Pipelines law. It will create a true one-stop shop, set up shovel-ready zones with pre-permitting so that we can approve LNG liquefaction export plants, mines, pipelines, nuclear plants, and also hydroelectric dams so that we can generate the power we need to be strong, self-reliant, and stand on our own 2 feet for a change.
He's appealing to the West right now.
Quick word, bringing it back to what we were talking about, which is tariffs, the threats to Canada, how to negotiate. We need these options. We need these options to build domestically, to build one Canadian economy. We need to act. We need to diversify our trade partners.
And that is
will
our
give us
time in this
strength
segment.
to the US.
That is our time. Okay,
So
you know
these
my job tonight. I got to be the heavy guy here every now and then,
Yeah,
making
heavy.
sure everybody comes to time. And I'm keeping an eye as well on making sure that everybody gets rough justice over here. That concludes our first section and our first debate. Up next, affordability and the cost of living.
Our goal is to double the pace of housing.
So both Singh and Carney were talking about this east-west energy corridor. How do you do an east-west energy corridor without pipelines? That doesn't make any sense to me. Carney says no new pipelines, but he wants an east-west energy corridor. What? Huh?
Open debate format, and Mr. Poilievre, you get the first question this time. Many provinces, including some provinces with conservative governments, have ambitious housing targets, none of which have been met. Why do you think your housing plan will be any different?
Let me start by talking to the young people of the nation and those who are aspiring to home ownership. You know, it was only 10 years ago you could buy an average house for $450,000. But in the last lost Liberal decade, housing costs have doubled, rising faster than in any country in the G7. And so now our youth cannot afford a home.
This could be
and our
where
seniors
Poilievre
are
hits him
worried
with
about being
Brookfield,
evicted.
with the
We can't
modular
afford
homes.
a fourth Liberal term of rising housing costs. We need a change. And our Conservative plan for change will, 1, axe the federal sales tax on new homes. 2, incentivize municipalities to cut their construction taxes to bring houses down in cost by $100,000. 3, sell off federal land for homes. And 4, train up 350,000 young trades workers who can help build those homes. Because you deserve a home, and we're going to make it happen for a change.
Also on the issue of affordability, Mr. Singh, you get the next question. How do you bring down grocery prices in the midst of a trade war?
I appreciate the.
It's the evil grocery store owners.
When I talk to Canadians, they tell me they're really feeling squeezed from the cost of living. That's one of the top things that people tell me about. People are saying, I can't afford to buy groceries. Every time I go to the grocery store, it's just ongoing worry and this feeling of anxiety that can I actually afford the things that my family needs? On top of that, people are worried about the cost of homes. I think those are the two biggest things I hear. So we can do things about this. Other countries have taken concrete steps. We can put in a price cap on food essentials. France has done it. Greece has done it to great success. It's brought down the cost of food significantly in both those jurisdictions. We can also ban corporate landlords from buying up the affordable homes to keep homes that are affordable. We can make things better for Canadians, but it requires having the courage to take on the powerful corporations that are ripping you off, that are price gouging you. And we know that price gouging is one of the major reasons why food prices are going up. You're never going to hear Pierre Poilievre or Mr. Carney talk about the fact that these are the corporations
Thank you,
ripping you
Mr.
off.
Singh. That's time. Mr. Blanchet, I want to ask you about old age security, which will soon cost this country $100 billion annually. We understand you would like to expand it. How would you pay for that?
We would want it to be just for everybody because the Liberals have created a discrimination against elders which are 65 to 75 years old, having 10% less income from federal government than those who are over 75. But the best way to do it is to have everybody pay its fair share in terms of tax, which means that one should not be entitled to hide money in fiscal paradise in order not to pay him or his clients or friends, not to pay billions of dollars in taxes that could be used to help the situation of elders. Those are things which are supposed to be applied to everybody. There are a lot of questions to be answered about that. Other ways to do it is to reduce the pressure on housing price to make sure that the whole budget of elders and families and workers can afford houses which have increased dramatically in price.
Merci, Monsieur Blanchet. That's time for this one. Mr. Carney, I want to ask you about housing, which over the past decade has gone from a problem to a crisis while the Liberals were in power. Is your policy on getting homes built any different from your predecessors, and how?
This is one of the reasons why I entered this contest, because of the housing crisis, the cost of living crisis, the housing crisis, and the Trump crisis to help fix it. And I would say, look, the housing approach is fundamentally different because we need a fundamentally different approach. We need to build housing at a rate that we haven't seen since the end of the Second World War. We do need a fundamentally different approach. And with the fundamentally different approach, we can build an entirely new industry. So the question is how? Now, Mr. Poilievre and I agree on some things. Okay? I agree as well on reducing the tax on first-time home purchases as a way to buy. But I am focused on increasing the supply of homes.
Modular
and doing that in a way
homes.
that uses Canadian technology and modular prefabricated housing. It uses Canadian lumber, including in reinforced timber, and uses Canadian workers. And in all respects, we're scaling up to double the rate of home building.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. That's time. We now move to open forum here. And Mr. Singh, you get the first comment. Many of you have pledged to cut the GST on many aspects of buying a home. And Mr. Singh, I want to ask you, would you cut the GST on anything else in order to make life more affordable?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm the only one on this stage that fought to give people a GST holiday. Interestingly, while the GST holiday helps working class folks, middle class
Poilievre
folks,
should have cut him off and said, wait a minute. These
essentials,
modular homes, the ones that you invested in with Brookfield?
voted against that. They oppose the idea of giving people
He doesn't
actual
want
folks
to
that
look
need help, a tax break,
mean.
and would rather give millionaires a tax break, which shows you whose side he's on, which is not surprising. But what is surprising is that Mr. Carney also said that giving people a break on their GST is a bad idea. Mr. Carney, why do you think giving a tax break to capital gains folks that earn more than $1 million is a good idea, but helping a family afford their groceries, helping people afford their bills for their internet, their cell phone, their home heating, giving them relief to take the GST off those is a bad idea, but giving a tax break to people who really only earn over more than $1.4 million, that's somehow a good idea.
Okay, you went after
That's your numbers.
You went after Mr. Poilievre first, so I'm going to give him the first shot to respond.
Well, Mr. Carney, the reality is that housing costs doubled under the Liberal government, while Justin Trudeau made exactly the same promises that you are now repeating today. He promised that he would double home building. In fact, home building went down. He promised that he'd reduce the cost. In fact, it went up. And here we are. Mark Carney is asking for a fourth Liberal term, repeating the exact same Liberal promises that priced you out of a house. Just a few weeks ago, before the election, the Liberals voted against taking the GST off new homes, and they have continued to build up bureaucracies that block construction. We need a change so that you can afford a home, and our change will be, again, to axe the sales tax on new homes, incentivize municipalities to speed up permits, free up land, and cut development costs. Train up 350,000 young people who can be in the trades to build those homes and sell off the land that is going to be needed in order to build homes. That is a real plan for you to own a home and afford your life for a change.
Mr. Carney, they're coming at you from both sides. What do you say?
Okay. I know it may be difficult, Mr. Poilievre. You spent years running against Justin Trudeau and the carbon tax, and they're both gone. Okay, they're both gone. And we're in a new
impersonation of them with the same policies tonight.
Very different. Look, I'm a very different person from Justin Trudeau. Focus is on results.
Hammer him.
So how
Hammer
to
him.
drive results in the housing market? You've got to change the model of building. You've got to increase the financing for housing developers, $25 billion on the table for those housing developers, $10 billion for deeply affordable homes, cutting development charges in half, lowering the cost of the building of those homes by 20%, and lowering the emissions and the run costs of those homes by another 20%. This is how you drive affordability. This is how you bring young people back into the housing market.
Exactly what Trudeau promised. You claim to be very different from Mr. Trudeau. Now, the point is to show that you are any better than Mr. Trudeau. You claim to have a lot of experience in many things, and you know things. Last time we had somebody saying that they knew things, it was the senators, and they killed the law that protected supply management because they knew better than us and were elected by nobody, exactly like you are today. You say that you are a great crisis manager. Which one? I heard of nothing. As far as I know, Brexit happened, even if you were against it. You say you are a great negotiator. What have you negotiated but fiscal paradises in Bermudas or Cayman Islands? You have to prove something, and you have to reveal what you
there it is
in those companies if you want people to believe you.
Mr. Singh, you wanted to.
Yes,
never mind
to the
him.
topic of housing. Now, it's very important. Obviously, we need to build homes that people can afford. Mr. Poilievre had the opportunity to show us what he could do. He was the Minister of Housing under Stephen Harper. And during that time, guess how many homes he built? He built 6 homes during that entire time. This is not something
Correct
you can trust
him.
to build homes.
False.
He built
200,000.
6 homes. And this has been confirmed again and again. He were
No, it
6
hasn't.
homes. That's it. Now, the problem, though, with Mr. Carney is while he's laid out a plan, the problem is that when he was the chair of Brookfield Investments, this is a company that made a strategic decision to buy up affordable homes in cities like Toronto where people were paying a decent rent. And they purposely bought those homes, kicked out the tenants, and jacked up the rents. That is not someone you can trust, sadly, to deal with the housing crisis when, Mr. Carney, you profited off of it.
We're going to get responses here. Mr. Poilievre first, Mr. Carney second.
First of all, Mr. Singh,
hold this up to remind you.
the Toronto
6 right here.
Star, the Toronto Star debunked your falsehoods
it was 6
on that.
homes, and
I
that's the
appreciate
facts.
neither Liberals or NDP are very good with math, but in that
You're
year, the
clearly-
year I
you
was
can
the
count up to
minister, if I
6, which
could,
is great.
the year I
Mr.
was,
Singh, let's let him answer.
in the year
It's
I
not
was,
high enough, though.
the year I was minister, we had 200,000 homes built, and guess what the average price of a home was at the time? $450,000.
And guess what happened
And
at the end of the
one
Jagmeet, shut up.
bedrooms rented out for $900, and that since that time, housing costs have actually doubled under the Liberals.
They doubled
and
under
now we have
Conservatives, too.
now we have Mr. Carney making tens of billions of dollars of spending promises that will
doubled under
ultimately
you as well.
continue to build bureaucracy. We don't need more bureaucracy in Ottawa. We tried that for 10 Liberal years, Mr. Carney. What we need is to build homes in communities.
Certainly
and
don't
that
need
means
Conservatives.
axing taxes on home building and getting the government out of the way so that builders can actually build.
I think-
Mr. Carney,
Can I pick
you
up-
are on housing. We need
Can
a
I-
change, and you, sir, are not a change.
Mark Carney.
I'm going to pick up on, I thought that answer was quite revealing. The first thing is that it's an attitude towards housing that absolutely ignores affordable housing, deeply affordable housing, issues with vulnerable people, ignores the rental market, ignores all other aspects of it. So the 6 are the relevant. Mr. Singh is absolutely right. The 6 are the relevant.
200,000.
The 200,000 are a different part of the housing market. There are many Canadians. There are many Canadians at different income levels. The second thing it reveals is a misunderstanding, or, well, a misunderstanding, I'll be polite, of how the government's balance sheet can catalyze enormous private investment. And that is what we need to do to solve the housing crisis. It happens to be what we need to do as a whole to address the economic crisis that's been forced on us by President Trump.
Mr. Blanchet?
Yeah. You have spoken much more than I have, so I won't ask a question. I will make a statement instead. I'm not saying no. I'm not saying that you cannot do what you pretend that you are able to do. We just have no proof so far. I'm saying quite clearly that you cannot be entitled to do it alone. You cannot be entitled to hold all the power in your 2 hands. You cannot go out there and fix things for Canada and Quebec without being seriously checked by serious people. You cannot go out there and speak for Quebec without Quebec having its own strong voice to protect itself and to promote its different economy. So if you want to collaborate, let's say right now that whatever happens, even if minority government happens, you will be a partner with the different Quebec economy and identity, which you have been not interested in for the economic part and not respectful for the identity.
Let me get Mr. Singh in at this point. Can you tell us what's the first thing you would do to make life more affordable for Canadians?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do, and I've laid out some of those things. I think fundamentally, I'm the only person on stage that not only fought for real relief for people in terms of affordability, I'm the only one that fought for pharmacare that actually makes life more affordable by giving people medication coverage. Dental care, it gives people more affordability by letting them access their services if you're a senior and a kid. I fought for childcare to make sure people could afford childcare. All measures that Mr. Poilievre voted against, all measures that Mr. Blanchet voted against. So if you want someone that's going to fight for you in Ottawa to actually make life more affordable, you can't entrust all the power to Mr. Carney. He doesn't have a track record of making life more affordable for people, but we do. So vote for a New Democrat, and we'll continue this work to make life more affordable for you, while the Conservatives and the Bloc have voted against those measures to make life affordable, because that's not who they care about. New Democrats are in it for you.
Pierre Poilievre.
The number one expense for families today is taxes, more than they spend on food, clothing, and shelter combined. This after 10 years of Liberal tax increases. We can't afford a fourth term of high Liberal taxes. That's why Conservatives have a plan for change. And that plan includes
voted
cutting
against every measure to help people out.
Shut
cutting
up.
income taxes by
Where's the moderator? Tell him to
15% for
shut
the
up.
average worker and seniors, saving a working couple up to $2,000, rewarding hard work again. Because hard work is actually being punished. Is actually being punished because of the very high taxes. Now, the Liberals promised 10 years ago they would lower them. They actually raised taxes on 9 out of 10 Canadians. We need a change in this country because your hard work should once again pay off with a powerful paycheck that buys you an affordable home on a safe street, and that's what we will deliver.
You want to save people
He doesn't interrupt Carney
cut
like
their
this.
dental care, which is thousands of dollars. Cut their child care, which is thousands of dollars. Cut pharmacare coverage, which is thousands of dollars. That's not a very good math deal right there. You're going to save people $2,000, but cost them tens of thousands of dollars. That's why you cannot afford Conservatives, and you certainly can't trust the Liberals on their own. You need New Democrats.
Mark Carney.
Let's see if he interrupts Carney.
That point, and then I'll respond to Mr. Blanchet. Child care in this country, $3,000 to $10,000 a year for a family, depending on where you live.
Province, jurisdiction.
Depending on where you live, that's what's being saved there. $800 per trip to the dentist. We've expanded dental care to 8 million
What?
Canadians. 8 million Canadians.
Because New Democrats are there.
Pharmacare. These are fundamental issues for affordability. We're talking about affordability and taking them off in order.
That's why you need New Democrats.
Quebec.
That's not what I've said.
And in terms of
income taxes
working with Quebec,
for Canadians.
yes, absolutely. Throughout the short time I've been Prime Minister, working directly with the Premier of Quebec, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, our Minister of Finance are from Quebec. Quebec and Quebec issues, whether it's
Why haven't
supply
you answered
management,
Mr.
language,
Legault's letter? He asked 5 things in the letter. He reduced his expectations.
We're talking about-
And you did not even answer him. And tonight, you are so much in love with Quebec.
Steve, the question that Canadians have to ask.
Why vote for Conservatives?
He's got the Mr. Singh, sorry, he has the floor. Come on.
The question you have to ask is, after a decade of Liberal promises, can you afford food? Is your housing more affordable than it used to be? What is your cost of living like compared to what it was a decade ago? And are you prepared to elect the same Liberal MPs, the same Liberal ministers, the same Liberal staffers all over again for a fourth term? Mr. Carney, Justin Trudeau's staffers are actually here with you at this debate in Montreal, writing the talking points that you are regurgitating into the microphone. How can we possibly believe that you are any different than the previous 10 years of Liberal government?
What am I seeing here?
Segment for you to respond.
Are these teenagers?
Look, I do my own talking points. Thank you very much.
Okay, hold on just a second. We're going to continue on in just a second. Carney just went, ooh, I'm scared. Ooh. Did he actually just do that? You guys saw that, right? I'm looking in the comments here. You guys saw what he did. Let's just go back a little bit here.
The short time I've been...
Could that be a turning point? People don't like that stuff. They already hate Singh because he's interrupting all the time. But this?
Prime Minister, working directly with the Premier of Quebec, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, our Minister of Finance are from Quebec. Quebec and Quebec issues, whether it's
Why
supply
haven't you answered
management,
Mr. Legault's letter? He asked 5 things in the letter. He reduced his expectations.
We're talking about...
Liberal promises. Can you afford food? Is your housing more affordable than it used to be? What is your cost of living like compared to what it was a decade ago? And are you prepared to elect the same Liberal MPs, the same Liberal ministers, the same Liberal staffers all over again for a fourth term? Mr. Carney, Justin Trudeau's staffers are actually here with you at this debate in Montreal, writing the talking points that you are regurgitating into the microphone. How can we possibly believe that you are any different than the previous 10 years of Liberal government?
25 seconds left in this segment for you to respond to that.
Look, I do my own talking points. Thank you very much.
Wow. That's petulance.
Biggest risk we have to affordability, the biggest risk we have to this economy is Donald Trump. So first and foremost, we've got to get that right. Secondly, we need to do it in a way that brings everyone along together. That means preserving pharmacare, dental care, child care, reinforcing health care, spending our
intrusion in Quebec jurisdiction over and again. I like if we're any better.
Same with Alberta.
Is there one thing Canadians can do that Quebecers cannot do? You are doing intrusions in our jurisdiction with our money, pretending you are better, and most of the time you try to copy what we did with our own money against us. What's that as a policy? Don't you have your own things to care about?
That really is time for this segment. I wanted to be polite and let everybody finish their points,
but I'm far behind,
we got to move on.
I took the liberty.
Thank you. Okay, that ends section 2. Up next, public safety and security.
Okay.
Fight crime, to protect Canadians, and to build communities that are safe, secure, and strong.
Keep
How?
crime, drugs, stolen cars, and other illegal substances out of our country.
We're going to invest in our borders, and that means hiring more border officers.
Resources are in short supply, not enough staff. This is not the nice way to treat people who come to our border.
Okay, same format, one-on-one questions and then open debate. Monsieur Blanchet, you get to go first in this one. Public safety and security. For a lot of people, that means the fentanyl crisis. I'd like to know what you could contribute to ending that crisis in this country.
The fentanyl crisis is a very serious issue, which is a bit less important in Quebec than it is in British Columbia. I think the whole border thing is the real issue. Immigration is a very important issue for Quebecers. Immigration has to be dealt with in an orderly fashion. Our borders are not dealt with in an orderly fashion. The rules are not respected. The rules are unclear. Some rules even invite people to hide for 2 weeks illegally before coming out. Some things has to be done. The situation of one person asking for asylum may take as much as 4 years without us reducing the number in order to deal with them in a human way. The services for every citizen in Quebec are being reduced because we cannot afford the fact that we are receiving much, much more people in Quebec from this specific type of immigration than we can afford, and we cannot teach them French.
That's time, Mr. Blanchet. We can, of course, return to the immigration issue during open debate should you choose to. Mr. Carney, question for you. The Liberal gun buyback policy, not considered a success by many people. Reviving it is in your platform.
Yeah.
Why would it work this time?
Yeah, I think, well, what we've seen with that policy is some success at the commercial level, but not at the individual level, because it hasn't been, in my opinion, it hasn't been organized properly, and it needs to be organized properly. And I've instructed the Minister of National Security and Public Safety in order to do that. So part of this is a different focus of government, a focus on results, a focus on clear milestones in the short term. Let me make a broader point, though, on gun, which is that we have a problem with guns coming over borders, which is why we've tightened our borders. We have an issue, though, with a gun industry that is continually coming up with new forms of assault rifles, mass killing machines. We've banned over 2,000 of these. Every single time there has been a vote in the House of Commons on gun control, Mr. Poilievre has voted against it. You can't be tough on crime.
If you've banned 2,000 guns, then what else can you do?
Come back on that in the open debate if you want to, but my question for you in this segment is, Indigenous people are statistically overrepresented in our correction system. Are you concerned that your tough on crime platform will make that worse?
No.
I'm concerned that Indigenous people are disproportionately the victims of crime. I give you the example of a wonderful group of Indigenous people who came under attack in Saskatchewan, and many of them were murdered. The killer was out of jail after 60 prior convictions. This is the result of 10 years of liberal laws that allow the same offenders to be released dozens and dozens of times, even when it's known they are a danger. We can't risk a fourth liberal term of soft on crime policies. We need a change. And the Conservative plan for change will bring in a 3 strikes you're out law. 3 convictions for serious crimes, you go to jail for at least 10 years, maybe for life, no chance of parole or bail. We will bring in life sentences for traffickers of fentanyl, human beings, and guns. And we will secure our borders to keep the illegal
Thank you,
guns
Mr.
out.
Poilievre. That's time. Mr. Singh, your question is about the RCMP, because you've got RCMP reform in your platform. What, in your view, is the problem with the RCMP?
Well, some of the basis for this is the concern that's been raised in more rural communities and northern communities that there have been some serious concerns about violence or inappropriate use of force when it comes to the execution of their duties. We want to make sure that we've got a top-tier police force that provides security and safety to those communities in a way that's sensitive and understanding of the communities they're serving. I also think what's very important is for Indigenous communities, Indigenous policing. This is an area of deep concern. I think everyone in our country should be safe. You should be able to be safe at home, safe when you go to work, safe if you take public transit, safe for your kids to be able to play in the local playground. And that's something I'm committed to. The other area that I'm focused on when it comes to public safety is making sure we prevent crime before it happens, and that's why we want to see increased investments in our border security. We saw under the Conservatives, they cut 1,100 border officers in one day. So that prevented our ability to keep our borders safe. That stops those materials from
Mr.
coming
Singh,
into the
that's
country.
time. Not sure it was about the RCMP, but maybe we can get back to that during the open debate segment, which we go to right now. And Mr. Poilievre, you get the first word on this one, and it sort of dovetails on the last answer you gave, which is you have pledged to be the first prime minister in this country to use the notwithstanding clause, setting aside charter rights of, as you call them, multiple murderers. Why do you think that's necessary?
To be clear, I want to uphold the charter rights of Canadians under Section 7 to life, liberty, and security of the person. Right now, that right is violated by multiple murderers who are given discounts. The case in question was a gentleman who went into a mosque and shot dead 6 innocent worshipers. He got, according to this ruling, only one 25-year sentence, meaning he could be out in his 50s. He only serves 4 years for every murder that he carried out. That is outrageous. And I will use the constitutional powers that are created for this purpose to ensure that mass murderers stay in maximum security penitentiary for life. They will only come out in a box. We will also pass tough new laws that prevent repeat offenders from getting out. If you commit 3 offenses under the 3 strikes law I propose, you will not be allowed out of jail until you prove that you are drug-free, that you are behaved perfectly, and that you've learned an employable skill.
You will only come out in a
10-year
box.
Sentence. We cannot allow liberal crime and chaos to go on terrorizing our communities. What we need is a real plan for change so that we can bring back the safety and the security that Canadians used to take for granted.
Let me get Mr. Carney to respond to that. Do you think that's an appropriate use of the notwithstanding clause of the Charter?
I think that the one of the core responsibilities of the federal government, Prime Minister, is to defend the fundamental rights and liberties of Canadians. And those fundamental rights and liberties of Canadians are outlined in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is 43 years old literally today. I think it's a very dangerous slope to override judgments of the Supreme Court of Canada. In fact, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms exists to protect Canadians from people like us on the stage, politicians who may use their power to override fundamental rights. And the issue in using by the federal government, I'll stop here, is not where you start, but where will you stop?
Mr. Poilievre, I should get Mr. Poilievre on that. Is it a
I
slippery
can't even
slope to
believe he
use it in
said
this
that.
case?
I must say, I would be quite interested too, because Mr. Carney said that he didn't want us to use the notwithstanding clause before adopting a law. And yesterday he said that he felt that it was wrong to use the notwithstanding clause after a law is adopted. So if we cannot use it before and we cannot use it after, it means that Mr. Carney believes that we should never use it. But it is very important. And the Ford case made it clear. The Constitution says how it should be used, but never how or what we will do with it, because it's the prerogative of the provinces. So do you want the Supreme Court to overrule another judgment of the same Supreme Court because you don't like it, because that would be being the hell of a politician as you define them.
Well, let me just start by saying, first of all, thank you. I just started by saying, let's not let Mr. Poilievre get away with making this ludicrous claim that anyone on this stage
Carney's
thinks that violent
watchdog
crime should get a less severe penalty. Obviously, that is not a special position that he's taking. Everyone agrees that horrible crimes should have horrible sentences. Judges are equipped to do that, so don't let Mr. Poilievre's rhetoric confuse people. Obviously, everyone agrees that if someone does something horrible, they should pay a horrible price for it. There should be appropriate sentence that's put in place by a judge.
Okay.
But what I'm concerned about is all of what Mr. Poilievre is talking about is after the fact. Now, there's heinous things that happen, and there needs to be severe penalties put in place. But we also need to keep communities safe. And that's what my focus is. Well, how do we stop crime before it happens? Much of the violent crime that's committed is committed by illegal handguns and firearms that come across the border. Now, Mr. Poilievre has admitted that as well, that it is illegal handguns and illegal weapons that are used in violent crime. So our plan is, let's stop those illegal weapons getting into our country in the first place. And the way we do that is by having stronger border security officers and having more people on the border. Mr. Pierre Poilievre, when he was in power in the Conservatives, they cut the number of border officers.
This is unbelievable that these people live in pie in the sky land.
Let's get back to Mr. Poilievre on the issue of whether, in using the notwithstanding clause under these circumstances, would be a kind of a slippery slope and encourage politicians to use it more.
No, we will use it to protect the charter rights of law-abiding Canadians. I'm interested in the rights of victims. Mr. Carney seems to be very interested in the rights of criminals. He says that it's dangerous for me to ensure that mass murderers stay behind bars for life. You know what's dangerous? Turning them loose on our streets. I don't think you appreciate, sir, the chaos that is unfolding in communities. In Toronto right now, the police have been forced to tell people to just let the thief steal the car. When they break into the house, just take the keys. Just let them take the keys so that you don't get hurt. People are living in terror in many of our communities precisely because of the catch and release bail law, C-75, which requires judges release the accused at the earliest opportunity under the least onerous conditions. Every single member of your Liberal caucus and your Liberal cabinet voted in favor of this bill, and they are all determined to keep it in place, despite constant promises to the contrary. Mr. Carney, Canadians deserve to live in peace and security. That is the right that I'm fighting for a change.
I'm fighting for that as well. And let me be specific about two things that have been raised. The first is with respect to these issues of car theft, home invasion, and I'll use the GTA area where there has been a sharp increase. How do you attack that? You attack it several ways. One, you increase the criminal penalties for that happening, particularly if you're part of a gang, particularly if you use a firearm.
And you will do that?
And we're doing so. We've committed to doing so. You put in place a reverse onus in terms of bail so that it has to be proven that there's not a risk, which we've also committed to. And then you go to what Mr. Singh was talking about, which is we have to reinforce our frontiers. That's why we're committing to an extra 1,000 Canada Border Service agents, an extra 1,000 RCMPs. That's why, as part of the broader fentanyl initiative, where we've added to the RCMP there, we've added drones, we're adding helicopters, we're adding surveillance, and we're going to the other end of the chain with respect to car theft, which is tightening security at the ports.
But heaven forbid we should keep these criminals in prison.
In order to get results, you need to focus at both ends of the chains in federal.
Thank you very much. I want to talk about one of the issues that has come up is the idea of the public safety concerns around the overdose crisis and how this is devastating our communities. We're seeing so many lives being lost. In that, we know that one of the ways to address that is by investing in some of the solutions like mental health services and rehabilitation services. Services keep our communities safe, having access to those good services. Both Mr. Carney and Mr. Poilievre are proposing cutting government spending and cutting those services. That's not going to make our communities safer. We need to see better investments in rehabilitation services, more investments in mental health. We need to respond to this serious crisis in our country with care and compassion. I've met with Moms Stop the Harm, an organization of moms that have lost their children to this opioid overdose crisis. They've literally had their children have died because of this. And they're saying we need to do everything possible to save lives, to stop this death from happening. And I think we need to listen to those moms, and that's my commitment.
Mr. Blanchet.
Two things as rapidly as possible. First, we believe that we should act on crime gangs and organizations, defining them as we do for terrorist organization. We have to protect our kids from the violence of those gangs, from the drugs being sold by those gangs, from the guns and whatever else being stolen, sale, being
sold.
By those gangs.
Sold?
And not sold, being, you purchase a thing and
sold.
Selling, sold, yeah, sold by those gangs. And we mostly have to protect our kids from being recruited by those gangs, becoming violent at 13 and 14 and 16 years old, because this is the real fear of parents like I am. This is a very dangerous situation. I want to come back to immigration because we said that we would come back to immigration. Do you remember the Century Initiative, a sad memory?
Here we go.
They said that they had not considered Quebec difference. They had not considered Quebec language. They wanted Canada to be a 100 million people country by the end of the century. Mr. Barton told me himself that he had not even thought about the Quebec difference in that analysis. And one of his closest collaborators is now a close counselor to Mr. Carney, which seems to be part also of that kind of project or ideology. So it is impossible for Canada to have all those people come into Canada. It is impossible for Quebec to receive all those people. And in Quebec, we have the language and values and secularity of the state issue, which is very important. So I say, pause. Let's do things properly. Let's receive migrants in an orderly fashion and successfully as a measure of respect for them also.
Mr. Poilievre, you wanted a word.
I speak to families all the time who are terrified by the scourge of drugs and illegal guns. And we know those guns are not Grandpa Joe's hunting rifle. So when the Liberals try to ban hunting rifles, they're really going after the wrong people. 90% of guns that come in that are used in crime are smuggled illegally over the porous, Liberal-run borders.
The border,
and that's why the police.
Shut up, Jagmeet.
Literally cut the border off.
Shut up.
Actually, if I could, the police actually endorsed me. The police in Barrie, in Peel, in Sault Ste. Marie have all endorsed me because they know that I will go after the gun smugglers and criminals with 2,000 extra frontline border guards that will stop the guns from coming in. But unlike the Liberals and NDP, I will not ban hunting rifles. The Liberals want to protect. I want to protect Canadians from criminals. The Liberals want to protect turkeys from hunters. I think we know which one makes the most
sense. Carney, quick intervention, Mr. Carney, then I got a question for each of you before this segment's out.
Okay. We absolutely fully support hunting and rights of hunters and Indigenous Canadians. But I want to raise an issue, which is a serious issue, talking about safety. There are people, we're in Montreal, in Toronto, across this country, who fear going to their synagogue, fear going to their community center, fear taking their children, leaving their children in school. And this has to stop. This is it's totally unacceptable. So what we're proposing is to make it a criminal offense to threaten or to impede anyone from being near or going to their place of worship, their school, their community center. This, it pains me that when we
it's already against the law,
because this is not what we should be doing as Canadians, of course. But
like
we
threatening is
let me get back. And this
a crime.
Is a fundamental issue with respect
Let me
to
get 10 seconds from each of you before this segment's out on what you perceive to be the biggest security threat to Canada right now. 10 seconds each. Mr. Poilievre.
The physical security threat to our country is the rampant crime wave that is running out of control. After the last decade, we've had a 116% increase in gun crime. We need to lock up the criminals.
I got to hold you to 10 seconds. Mr. Carney?
Well, we're in a security section. I think we didn't have a chance to talk about anything internationally. I think the biggest security threat to Canada is China.
China, you say?
Yeah.
Mr. Singh?
Biggest security threat, illegal guns and drugs coming across the border, and cuts to services that would make our public safety and security even worse.
Last word to Monsieur Blanchet.
the fact that
He-
neither
what?
Quebec or
He's
Canada
lying.
is able to protect itself, and that we are still dependent and entirely dependent on Americans to protect us.
Okay, that is the end of that section. Gentlemen, up next, energy and climate.
Oh, here we go with the climate change.
Pipelines, getting things built, unleashing production.
We are unlocking major infrastructure projects, including in conventional.
Okay, guys, I'm only going to be able to carry this to about quarter to the hour, so another half hour, and then I have to go. We've got a show tonight at 8 o'clock featuring the BC Strong folks, James Davidson, Dr. Stephen Malthouse, Dr. Charles Hoff. We're going to talk about the problems they're having in British Columbia. Okay, so another half hour, then I got to jump out of this, and we'll jump back in with the regular show starting at the regular time. Here we go.
To build new pipelines to get our oil and gas to market.
Well, it's not an approach I favor with public money. There's not any projects that are on the table, so it's not a specific project to look at. I favor, when it comes to the environment, building an east-west energy grid that connects low-cost energy and allows for families to reduce their electricity costs. But let's put this all in context. We're talking about what our energy solutions are in the context of a climate crisis. And we're not just talking about a climate crisis in the far future. We're living it right now. I remember I met a mom a couple of years ago before I had kids who told me she was worried about taking her kids out on some days because of the forest fires in BC. It meant that it was unsafe for kids to go outdoors. Fast forward to when I became a parent just a couple years after that, and I literally worry about the same thing. The forest fires we saw a couple years ago meant that many places that didn't see this before saw days where there was such smoke in the air that it was dangerous for kids. We've seen extreme weather, forest fires, heat domes, floods impacting us. We've got to do everything we can.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. That's time. Mr. Poilievre, where does fighting climate change land on your list of priorities when it comes to expanding energy opportunities in this country?
It lands within our priorities of bringing home jobs while bringing down emissions around the world. Look, the reality is that if we push production out of our country to more polluting countries, it actually makes the problem worse. But that has been exactly the Liberal approach with the anti-development law, C-69, blocking of 15 LNG export plants over the last 10 years. We have seen more of those jobs go abroad. I want to bring them home. My plan will be to approve, for example, natural gas liquefaction and export. If we sent our gas to India, for example, to displace half of their demand for electricity, we could reduce emissions by 2.5 billion tons, which is 3 times the total emissions of Canada. That's the way we bring emissions down and jobs up. It's common sense, and now it's time to bring it home.
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre. The next question is for Mr. Carney. How would your government fast-track pipelines and mining projects while also following the Supreme Court decision that requires consent of Indigenous communities?
Well, I think the first thing, and this goes back a bit to where we started, which is recognizing that we are in a crisis. We need to act with maximum force, and having a process and a consultation, but a consultation with a purpose, which is to identify those projects, those investments of national interest that are really going to move the dial in terms of growth, jobs, energy security, while being consistent with long-term competitiveness, which necessarily means lower carbon. And so part of that process is ensuring that First Nations, Indigenous peoples, are there from the start. It also includes their ability to participate fully in those projects, and that's why, and I know you, I can tell, like, you've got to tell on when I've gone on too long, so I'll finish up, which is, that's why we're doubling. Our proposal is to double the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program to $10 billion. What does that actually mean? It means an ability for them to invest equity in those projects and be full partners. Thank you.
My tell is my clock, and my clock is at 0, so that's how it goes. Monsieur Blanchet, do you still oppose pipeline construction in Quebec, even though a majority of Quebecers now apparently say they support it?
We will know about that when we have held the debate about that, which has not begun yet. We are just beginning it. First, we are hearing very creative numbers, and we are being fed nonsense. And we will be back to it in a few minutes. But energy, trade, commerce is from south to north or north to south, and it's true in Quebec also. In a little more than 3 years, Donald Trump won't be in office, and there will be not one more pipeline having been built once we get there. So let's be serious, responsible, and we will be back with the numbers. We don't want to pay in Quebec for such monstrosities which will provide us with nothing.
We now move to open debate, and you all will get a chance, or have had a chance, to get the first shot at this. Monsieur Blanchet, it is your turn to get the first shot. Canada has a substantial supply of critical minerals which are in high demand. Are you in favor of allowing these minerals to be mined?
Of course, it has to be done properly. Quebec has probably the most important clean phosphate reserves in North America. In Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, it is very important. It has to be exploited. This is the best way to use Paul Saguenay as an infrastructure that we need. We have lithium. Everybody needs lithium. Transportation has to be taken from oil to clean energy. This is what we want to be working on. It is part of the specificities, specifics of Quebec economy. So we are in favor of that. But we don't want to pay for the $30 billion which have been spent on oil and gas by the Liberals last year. It's $7 billion from Quebec. We don't want to pay for the $40 billion which have been spent by the Liberals on Trans Mountain. It's $9 billion from Quebec. Those are $16 billion of which not $1 has been spent in Quebec to develop a lot more power and wealth for Quebecers with our own money.
We need to let the leader of the Liberals respond.
Well, actually, I was going to pick up on the enormous opportunity that exists in Quebec, exists in Ontario, exists in the north of Canada, really exists across this great nation in terms of critical metals and minerals. We are have one of the biggest resources in this country. And this is, it's not just an enormous economic opportunity, it is a strategic opportunity for Canada. So we have to make a decision, not just to develop it, but how do we develop it and who are our partners for it? Do we become more dependent on the United States, which is what they want? By the way, President Trump this week said he might put a tax on critical metals and minerals, just showing again the unreliable. If I may, and so the discussions that
negotiate.
If I may finish.
Let's let him finish.
Let me finish. So the opportunity includes in Europe and includes in Asia as our partners. Last point. In order to get it done, we'll put in place a first and last mile fund. So these projects are connected to road and rail so they can go quickly to market. And we will have all of the other fast tracking measures in place that I talked about earlier in terms of capital, timing, approvals, so that we can move quickly, we can be stronger at home.
Always with the approval of
Mr. Singh has the floor.
We should absolutely take advantage of the fact that we've got incredible amounts of critical minerals in our country. And the way we do that is with any energy project or any project of this nature, make sure it's got the local community buy-in. It creates good jobs in communities, make sure we are meeting all our environmental needs, and we work with Indigenous partnership. And so I absolutely agree with that. I want to build on something Mr. Blanchet mentioned about the investments that this country has made. What I found very troubling is that the past number of years, the Liberal government record is one where we have spent the most subsidies compared to any other country in the G7 on subsidizing oil and gas. These are highly profitable companies.
You voted
I think that's
for
the
it.
wrong thing to do. We fought against it again and again.
No, you voted
and then
for
the
it
Liberals have continued to do it. And so my question really to Mr. Carney is, will you commit to ending oil and gas subsidies? We should be using that to invest in people, not giving it to highly profitable oil and gas companies.
Yeah, we talk.
I promise Mr. Poilievre the next, we'll come back and get that question answered. Mr. Poilievre.
Well, Mr. Carney, you point out that Donald Trump has a wrong-headed idea of putting a tax on our mines and our industry. And that is wrong. But so do you. You want to apply a massive industrial carbon tax on Canadian mines, Canadian steel mills, Canadian aluminum plants,
You want to let them just
Canadian oil and gas plants. And your idea is to double the tax that Trump is applying by hitting them a second time. This will do nothing for the environment. It will actually ship our jobs south of the border,
Mr. Poilievre's plan is let them
like
pollute as much as they
President
want.
Trump
Not a good
wants. My plan is to bring that production home here to Canada. For example, I will give a tax credit to low-emitting Canadian industry like Quebec's aluminum, for example, or British Columbia's natural gas, so that we not only bring home the production, but we do it below global average levels of emissions, so that we actually help the environment while bringing home the jobs for our people at the same time. That is a sensible, pragmatic approach that puts us in charge of our economic destiny, so we can stand up to the Americans from a position of strength for a change.
Mr. Carney, we've got, hang on a second. I want to give you a chance to speak to Mr. Singh's criticism about oil and gas subsidies and Mr. Poilievre's criticism about the industrial carbon tax.
Okay, I'm going to make 3 points. I'll make 4 if you want me to respond to that, but I want to make 3. The first is that I answered this question last night, but I think the puck had already dropped in the Canadians game, so not everyone heard it. Yes, end to oil and gas subsidies.
That's why you need New Democrats.
Secondly, I would have done it independently. Secondly, recognizing that the biggest component of that was the cost of building Keystone. Keystone, which is the pipeline which has helped to increase oil and gas oil exports rather by 50% in this country. That is an asset of the people of Canada. We own it. And the question of what to do it. So it's not a subsidy that has disappeared, it's actually an asset of Canada. The third point, though, in terms of where the oil and gas industry, particularly the oil industry, wants to and needs to go, which is to become low carbon in the production and transportation of oil. One of the big projects we need to move forward with is carbon capture and storage, the Pathways project, so that we have oil and gas that is competitive, not just today, 10 years from now and 20 years from now, as the world uses less. We want to have more market share. We need to do that. My government will move that.
But by definition, a subsidy isn't when we buy a pipeline. I'm talking about subsidies that go to oil and gas companies. Independent, separate from the country, oil and gas companies. That's what I'm talking about.
The figure you quoted last night included the cost of the pipeline.
Do you want to address his point?
Billions of dollars we're spending. We got to stop spending.
Sorry, can we get you to address his point about the industrial carbon tax?
How much will the industrial carbon tax add to the price of a car?
So the first thing I want to say is I'm going to address the broader point. Broader point is the entire absence of a climate plan from Mr. Poilievre, which, by the way, is going to put our industry and our country at a disadvantage as we're looking for new trading partners. Guess what? Most people want to deepen our partnership in Europe, in Asia. Those countries care about whether or not you've made progress. Second thing is, we're designing a program so that the big polluters pay Canadians at home for making responsible climate choices, for retrofitting their home, getting their emissions down, or improving otherwise. And that is smart climate policy. It's better for the big polluters, and it's better for Canadians.
Pierre Poilievre.
Mr. Carney didn't answer my question. I asked how much would an industrial carbon tax on Canadian steel add to the price of a car. He won't answer because he knows that it will be very expensive because there's lots of steel in cars. Now, Mr. Carney has temporarily
But do you know the answer?
hidden the
You don't know
carbon
the answer
tax.
either. You're just throwing out random questions.
Thousands of
Just
dollars.
making it up, though. You don't
extra
know.
cost.
I do know the answer to that question. He's wrong.
When you add taxes to steel, you raise the price of everything that uses steel. When you add taxes to the price, when you add the carbon tax onto the price of, for example, fertilizer, you increase the price of food. So while Mr. Carney has temporarily hidden the Liberal carbon tax at the pumps while keeping the tax fully in law and planning to raise it after the election, he's also going after a tax on our industry that will ultimately be passed on to you. After a lost Liberal decade of rising costs, we cannot afford a fourth Liberal term. We need a new government that will fully axe the carbon tax, increase the jobs that we have here in Canada, and bring down your cost of living.
We've got just a little over 3 minutes left in this segment. So, Mr. Singh, I want to ask you, do you think climate change is still a priority from Canadians? You're out there. What are you hearing?
Absolutely. You speak to any young person and they think, we're seeing climate crisis in front of us happening right now. You speak to seniors who say, we used to be able to live in our homes without air conditioning, and now we're seeing heat crises in communities that never had worries about extreme weather. We're seeing flooding, we're seeing forest fires like never before. We are living in a climate crisis. So Canadians are absolutely worried about it. As soon as we come into a summer, we start seeing those forest fires again. It's top of mind for Canadians because they're living it, they're seeing it. And I want those Canadians to know, Mr. Carney is not going to end those fossil fuel subsidies unless I'm there to fight back. Mr. Poilievre wants to let big polluters pollute as much as they want, poison our beautiful land, our water, and air. He wants to let them dump into our oceans. I'm going to fight back and defend our environment.
Monsieur Blanchet, on the issue of whether or not people still care about climate change.
I think people should be kept very informed about climate change because we are in a very strange denial situation about climate change, which still exists and is very expensive. And I'm sorry to crash your party, guys, but you are telling fairy tales. Clean oil and gas is a fairy tale. Large-scale carbon sequestration, sorry, I'm French, is a fairy tale. It does not exist. If Alberta wanted to exploit oil and gas and it were not a matter of pollution, I wouldn't mind at all. That's their business. Our own powerhouse in terms of energy in Quebec is clean energy. We are the best place in the world to achieve that. Our market is the northeastern part, Democrat part of United States. We want to keep our money to create wealth in Quebec for Quebecers. Let us be different because we can afford to be different.
Let me give, I will get to you because I said I would, but you've taken a couple of hits here and I want to give you a chance to respond to some of the things that people on this side of the stage have said.
Thank you. Well, first of all,
this is all a bunch of horse shit.
We want to ban the dumping of raw sewage into our waters. We want to hold large corporations to high environmental standards to protect our water and air. But we cannot do that by raising taxes and sending jobs overseas, as Mr. Carney is proposing to do. That has been the approach of the last 10 years of the Liberal government. What the biggest companies that develop our resources say is that we need to repeal the Liberal anti-development law C-69, a law Mr. Carney wants to keep in place. They say we need to repeal the industrial carbon tax and get rid of the Liberal energy cap. We need 6 months approval in order to take back energy security and energy sovereignty.
We can summarize that.
Mr. Carney, Mr. Carney, hang on. Last word to Mr. Carney in this segment, please.
Thank you very much. You know, I was born in Fort Smith in the Northwest Territories, just north of what the oil sands became. When I was born and when I was growing up in Edmonton, early days, it was a fairy tale, quote unquote. But you know what happened? Canadian ingenuity, Canadian engineers, Canadian governments, both the federal government and the Alberta government got together and converted this.
The worst pollution in the world.
If I may,
the worst pollution
may I finish?
in the
May I
world.
finish?
10 more seconds to finish, please. Let him finish his point.
That's the opportunity we have. That's the opportunity we have in carbon capture. That's the opportunity we have in small modular reactors. That's the opportunity we have in hydrogen beyond. This country can be a clean energy superpower. My government will help deliver it.
And that is time for this segment. Gentlemen, let us go to our final theme, which is called Leading in a Crisis.
Canadians know how to weather a storm. Canadians know how to get through a difficult time.
If, at the end of the day, we end up with the balance of power, Quebec is safer than it could be in any other scenario.
Now is not a time for weakness. Now is the time to take back control.
Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves.
Okay, leading in a crisis is a pretty broad theme that allows us to explore many different avenues here. So let's get to it. Mr. Carney, you get the first question this time. We haven't balanced a budget in this country in 17 years, and 10 of those years were under your party. You have pledged to get us to a balanced budget in 3 years. Question is, how?
Harper's last budget was balanced.
Let me put this in the context of leading in a crisis, which is, in a crisis, you got to plan for the worst. Worse is that the U.S. actually does want to take us over. Secondly, you got to have a plan to build, and that'll include a fiscal plan, and I will get to that in a second. The third thing is you need to respond in a crisis with overwhelming force. You need to think big. You need to move rapidly. The things we've been discussing today are a subset of what we can and should do as a nation, and we can deliver. And government can play a role, but its role has to be catalytic. And so our approach is that we will slow the rate of spending. It's been growing at 9% a year, operational spending, program spending, away from transfers, individual, 9% a year. We'll slow that to 2%. We will focus on a small amount of capital spending by the federal government in order to drive enormous private investment up to $500 trillion by 5 years.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Ukraine surely constitutes a crisis. Leading in a time of crisis.
Why
Mr. Poilievre,
are they
question for you.
talking about
If the United
Ukraine?
States withholds support from Ukraine going forward, do you believe Canada should commit more to assist?
I believe we should continue to support Ukraine. Our party supported donating missiles that the Canadian military was decommissioning. We supported funds and other armaments to back the Ukrainians in the defense of their sovereignty. We also need to rebuild our own Canadian military because the Russians want to make incursions into our waters. We'll be buying 4 massive Arctic icebreakers. I'll be opening the first Arctic base since the Cold War in Canada, CFB Iqaluit. We're going to double the size of the Arctic Rangers and fill the vacancies in our Canadian armed forces. We need a change to rebuild our military, which has been so disintegrated under the cuts and the mismanagement of the last 10 years. But we can have a change because we have the best soldiers, sailors, and airmen in the world, and they will have full backing from my government if you give me the honor of becoming Prime Minister.
I may come back to that one in the open forum
Thank
because
you.
I'm not sure we got an answer about Ukraine on that one, but okay.
Well,
going on. Monsieur Blanchet.
The answer was yes.
We'll get more details, perhaps, as we go forward. Monsieur Blanchet, given the U.S. trade war, should any talk of a referendum on Quebec independence be put on pause?
That one is easy. It will happen only after the negotiation is over, and that's a good thing. I want to say I support the idea. We must help Ukraine, but we also must help the civilians of Gaza, and we must destroy Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. You know what? I don't want to be the leader of Canada. You will understand that. I don't want to be Prime Minister. But I can offer to be a partner, a responsible partner, a collaborative partner. If Quebec is respected in its differences, in its aluminum industry and lumberwood industry and culture and French language and values of secularity of the state, which is the price to be paid in order to have real equality, then, if we are respected, we will be a partner, and then even Canada will be stronger in its negotiation against Donald Trump. This is what I am offering. Respect us.
Mr. Singh, I watched last night's debate. You seemed very eager to talk about health care, so let's talk a little more health care right now. You have
Health care is not a
many
federal
promises on health care.
responsibility.
If a province says to you, we'll take your money for health care, but not your conditions on how to spend it, what do?
We've got to negotiate. We can't be giving away money without clear conditions. We're in a healthcare crisis right now. And a crisis
You're not
that is
giving
hurting
any money
people
away.
across
You
this
are
country. People are waiting desperately in line in emergency
giving
rooms
each
for
province
hours
what is
and
promised
hours. Seniors are
constitutionally
waiting
for health care.
Years and years to get the care that they need for surgeries that would remove pain or help them deal with mobility issues. We're in a serious crisis. Healthcare workers are burnt out. They are
This whole debate's a
overstretched.
farce, you guys.
And
It's a
what
farce.
we're seeing is more and more privatization, and that is hurting our public universal healthcare system. So we've got to fight back against it. We cannot allow our public money to go to a for-profit private clinic lining the pockets of a rich CEO or investors instead of going towards care. We need to make sure that we are investing in solutions where care gets to people, not profiting those at the very top. And so that's my commitment. I'm going to fight to make sure
not
we defend
your
our healthcare
responsibility.
against the threats of
Thank you, Mr.
Americanization
Singh.
and privatization.
Okay, we now go to open forum debate, and perhaps, Mr. Poilievre, you get the first word here. This might be a good time to put a little more flesh on the bone of what you think Canada could do for Ukraine if the U.S. backs out.
Yes, and my answer is that we should continue to support Ukraine. We don't need to follow the Americans in everything they do. When they're wrong, then we will stand on our own and with other allies. And with respect to Ukraine, that of course includes support with intelligence, equipment, armaments, but it also includes defunding Putin. Right now, Vladimir Putin has a monopoly on the European energy market because, frankly, the Liberals blocked exports of Canadian natural gas off the Atlantic coast. They blocked multiple projects. I would rapidly approve those projects on national security grounds so that we can actually ship Canadian natural gas over to Europe, break European dependence on Putin, defund the war, and turn dollars for dictators back into paychecks for our people.
Mr. Carney, you wanted to add.
Well, I want to go to the situation in Ukraine because it's very important. We've been a steadfast, Canada has been a steadfast ally, and Canadians have stepped up, welcoming Ukrainians into their homes and supporting them in other ways. In my first month as Prime Minister, we joined the coalition of the willing to support Ukraine as the U.S. stepped back. So led by France, the United Kingdom, with Ukraine, number European nations, Australia,
The
ourselves, New Zealand.
coalition of the willing?
That's an example of how the new world is going to be. Canada participating in these areas and helping. It also means open trade. Mr. Poilievre voted against free trade agreement with Ukraine. It means aid for Ukraine. Mr. Poilievre wants to cut foreign aid, including for Ukraine, or not. He didn't mention support for aid for Ukraine. We have to stand by them. We have to be there, and this government has been.
Mr. Singh.
New Democrats absolutely support standing with Ukraine and will continue to do that. But I appreciate the opportunity in talking about leadership in crisis, talk about many of the crises that we're up against. And one of the crises we're up against in our country with the threat of Donald Trump, with the threat of the trade war, and with the privatization and Americanization of our healthcare system is the healthcare system. And what we have learned today, Mr. Carney mentioned slowing operation spending. That's a cut to services. He said his plan. He has a plan to balance the operating budget within 3 years. That's going to require massive cuts to spending. We calculated that at $43 billion in cuts. In fact, Rosemary Barton, when he was on the show on February 16th, he said he would cut spending. He said it would be in operations. He defined it as transfers in health. And finally, longtime Liberal and former House Leader Karina Gould said that Mr. Carney's plans would mean massive cuts. That's the only way to achieve it. So, Mr. Carney, do you think it is leadership to cut health care at a time when it is in crisis? I think it is wrong. We can't do that.
We will not cut transfers for health care. We will not cut health care spending, full stop.
But
we'll
Mr.
have
Carney,
a detail, if I may.
Who do we believe, Mr. Carney today, or the one he spoke on Rosemary Barton's show on February 16th, the one that repeated again that he would cut spending? Who do we believe?
If I may, consistently said we'll preserve all transfers to the provinces, including the increases. We will preserve all the transfers to individuals, I won't detail them all, but there. So we're looking at addressing an operational spend, which is about $150 billion. We will address that. We will make it more efficient, and we will do it in 3 years, and we'll balance that budget.
Mr. Blanchet.
I am 6 minutes behind Mr. Carney, so I will speak a little bit longer. First, I will support any initiative which will bring Canada aligned with Europe and NATO in order to be stronger and facing new.
All right, that's fine. That's good. That's enough. That's enough. This last 10 minutes has devolved into nothing but a bunch of BS talking about Ukraine and climate change, and we know better than that. The sad thing is that Poilievre gets dragged into this and he has to play their game or he's vilified by all of the left-wing corporate media. You saw that video that I played at the beginning of this show tonight, this special show, where the CBC journalists were absolutely appalled that the independent media were allowed into the French debates last night, and they will be allowed in again tonight to ask questions. Those people, Rosemary Barton said. So if you try to say, hey, climate change is just a bunch of BS, or we're not going to support Ukraine, they will be all over you. They will eviscerate. And what does that mean for your chances of ever becoming prime minister, ever winning the federal government? Nothing. So he's got to play that game, and it sucks. We need to find a way to change that narrative. We need to find a way to change the zeitgeist of this country somehow. Because there is a huge, huge ideological divide right now. And when conservatives have to play that BS game, that just enrages me no end. Okay, guys, I'm going to sign off for now, this special show. You can go ahead and keep watching the debate on CPAC if you want or wherever else. I'm coming back in 15 minutes with BC Strong's James Davidson, Marcella Desjarlais, Dr. Stephen Malthouse, and Dr. Charles Hoff to talk about the issues that are going on in BC right now. And they're very authoritarian. They are very, very bad. So I'll catch you in 15 minutes. I hope you enjoyed what you were watching. And I have no idea who won this thing. But I don't think that Poilievre landed the knockout blow he needed to land. Okay, back soon. Talk to you in a bit.